Hey, you're listening to Ty Bollinger of CancerTruth.net. You're also listening to Justin and Kate with Extreme Health Radio. These guys are great. Enjoy listening to them. I always do.
Welcome to Extreme Health Radio. Extreme Health Radio.
Where natural solutions to almost every health condition are out there. Join us on our journey to find them.
Now here are your hosts,
Broadcasting from sunny Southern California around the world.
Justin and Kate Stellman.
Well, here we are again, Kate.
Back-to-back episodes.
Back-to-back episodes. So
Never a dull moment for the Stellmans.
Never a dull moment. It's a beautiful day here in Southern California. Once again, it's nice and blue skies. It's actually been a bit cloudy lately.
Good old June gloom, they call it here.
Yeah.
The marine layer.
We have a lot to be thankful for, that's for sure.
Today is gorgeous. I'm thrilled.
My name is Justin, and I want to wish you a pleasant good afternoon or good evening to you wherever you are around the world. I know we have listeners in over 100 countries, so I hope you're having a great day, whatever you're up to. And this is extremehealthradio.com, and this is Justin and my wife,
Kate.
And we're broadcasting worldwide from Southern California, so we're glad to have you join us. And we do shows 4 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And it's a lot of fun bringing this really great information to you. We have a lot of fun with it. So I'm glad that you're on the call. And if you'd like to follow our work, you can do that on Facebook if you're interested in joining our community, extremehealthradio.com/Facebook. And you can click the like button on there and you'll be
like
off,
us.
and you'll be off and running. I don't know what happens after that, but you'll be good to go. For reference, this is Thursday, June 27th, 2013, and this is episode number 121. So feel free to sit back and relax and not take any notes. We'll take all the notes for you. Actually, Kate.
I will take the notes for you.
Kate will take all the notes. So I hope you enjoy the episode. And if you'd like to join the show, you can do that, Justin, at extremehealthradio.com or
Kate, K-A-T-E, at extremehealthradio.com.
And another feature we have is a voicemail feature. So if you want to record a question to any of our guests, you can go to extremehealthradio.com/voicemail and record it right from your computer. And it's a great way to interact with the guests and get your question answered. And a lot of fun that way.
Yeah, that's been fun lately to play those.
Yeah, we got one of those today. So
we did.
For Daniel. And if you'd like to support us financially, you can do that if you ever make purchases on Amazon. I know a lot of people do. You can go to extremehealthradio.com/Amazon anytime you make a purchase there. It doesn't have to be health related, and that would be a great way to support our work. We'll get a couple bucks for it, and that'll help pay all the bills around here.
Yep.
And we got some great shows coming up. Next couple guests are Konstantin Monastersky.
You're pretty good with that,
That's
actually.
quite a name, isn't it?
You hardly butcher it, ever. You have once.
I have once, or twice.
Or twice.
His website is gutsense.org, and he's written a book called The Fiber Menace, and written a lot of information about how damaging fiber is to the body. So we've had him on once before, and he's sort of backed by popular demand. A lot of people talking about him. And then another guest that we've had a lot of people talk about is Chris Kaler.
Yeah.
From chriskaler.com.
I think he's .net, isn't
Is he .net? And he's got a practice there in Canada with energetic medicine.
I've been working with him quite a bit. He is a fascinating individual.
He is. And so he's going to be on the show again. So if you have any questions about energetic medicine, things like that, you can always email me and I will ask him any question you have. And today, I'm really excited. We had to sort of reschedule our interview with Daniel Vitalis last time, and we were really upset about that because we love Daniel Vitalis and his work, and his work has changed my life. And if you've heard him, and I'm sure many of you have, I'm sure he'll change your life as well. He's doing lots of great things out in the world today. He's got a website called sirthrival.com, where you could buy lots of his amazing products there. And he's also got danielvitalis.com. And today's going to be part 2 of a 4-part series we're doing with Daniel. And this is going to be on water. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of the mystical, crazy things that's going on with water that you probably haven't heard about.
I can't wait.
So Daniel, are you in Maine these days?
I sure am.
In Maine. You're back in Maine for the summer months, huh?
tucked up into the corner of the United States. And for some people listening, they may not know that Maine is actually part of the United States, but it is, in fact.
I've heard about that. Yeah, there's rumors going on about that.
We're getting a geography lesson too.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So you're done with your pilgrimage there in Arizona and you're back in Maine. And are you growing a garden or doing anything fun like that?
Man, I do have a garden, and I am really grateful for Alexander, my partner, who really tends to it much more than I get the opportunity to. So it's not quite up to the standard I would like it to be, but it's definitely, I put together a seed package for my website, Surthrival, and we gathered together all these different heirloom seeds. And so we're able to grow some of those. But, I'm looking forward to the future when things relax a little bit more. I can grow a little bit more than I am now.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's sort of similar how we are here with Kate. She does a lot of the work in the garden, and she loves it.
I love it.
I love it too.
Good for the soul. Yeah, you're in here typing away.
Yeah, it's good to have a garden, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what kinds of things are you working on lately, Daniel?
Well, I think I was telling you guys just before the call, I've got to focus right now on emergency medicine, which is an old passion of mine. And it's really interesting to be involved. And when I say that, what I mean is I'm studying as an EMT right now to work the back of ambulances sort of locally. And it's a fascinating thing to get involved with mainstream medicine. I mean, as you guys know, mainstream medicine is not really my philosophy focus. But I got to say, I've come to see this thing, which is that if you are in a traumatic incident, for example, like you were in a car accident, something really traumatic happens to your body, you want that mainstream medicine to be there to get you stable again. But once you're stable, you don't want that mainstream medicine giving you you don't want them at all involved in your long-term care. What you want then is natural medicine. You want herbal medicine. You want nutritional medicine. You want energetic medicine. That's what keeps you healthy. Mm-hmm. But, if you're involved in a car accident and you're bleeding out, you don't want the, energetic healer there and the herbalist to work on you, do you? You want that person who can keep the blood in your bucket and get you stable again. So it's funny because it's like mainstream medicine has created all this great stuff for emergencies, and they're trying to apply it long term. And it's really funny to watch because it fails. It's actually not funny to watch. It's really sad to watch. But and conversely, herbal medicine is really great. It's a passion of mine for my long-term care. But like I said, you need other interventions. I have this funny story in my past. I remember watching a friend get bit by a diamondback rattlesnake in Arizona, and we were with our crew of herbal loving, fun loving hippies, and everybody's like, what are we gonna do? And they were grabbing all these different essential oils and trying to stick his finger in clay and trying to do they were trying to do Reiki on him, and obviously his hand just starts swelling up and his arms swell, and he ended up in the hospital, almost lost his arm, and luckily was able to save it. But it was one of those instances where you want that sort of mainstream medical care, but then you want to get out of there as soon as possible. Get away from there as soon as possible, so you can go back to your natural healing. So, I'm really into balance and trying to develop both skills and looking toward this sort of herbal EMT idea for the future.
I love it. I love it. I kind of want to crack a joke here, but in all seriousness, do you sit in those classes? And I know before the show you're talking about how it's kind of surreal to sit there and listen to what they're all talking about in terms of their care for people. But do you have a hard time kind of sitting there and being silent or raising questions just to get people to think and not really want, having the right mindset behind it or any of those kinds of issues?
The level of ignorance is shocking. It's true. It's been a really good check-in for me because I'd say for the last, decade, I've been living in a bubble of, one, healthy people, two, it goes beyond healthy. It's people who have a spiritual commitment to life. Right. And what I'm surrounded with in this class is interesting because these people don't have that. I mean, that's what most of the mainstream is really, really lacking. Right. It's not just that they don't understand how to eat and how to take care of themselves. It's that they don't believe that life is magical, special, or spiritual. And they've been somehow they've been tricked into relinquishing that most important thing. And so it's really what's strange to watch is this. I think a lot of the people who participate in emergency medicine do it because they know at some point they're going to need it. And they're all like getting, they're in there. It's funny. Here's the funniest part. Going over things like the cardiovascular system while these people are eating donuts. right? Watching them come back from Dunkin' Donuts with a styrofoam coffee cup, you know, and then talk about, you know, things like strokes and things like heart attacks and how to treat them, but never even making the connection that they're creating them. And that's been, you know, and they're just trying to understand. I go in there with 6 mason jars of smoothies and liquids every day. And they, you know, and I get called, you know, they make jokes and they laugh about it and they don't understand it. And
you got a hyperbaric oxygen tank next to you.
Right. Well, you know, here's what's funny. They laugh at the glass mason jar. But they're, you know, I've just been blown away that I'm blown away that styrofoam cups are even legal. I mean, here are these people, they're drinking out of a cup that's going to take 6 million years to biodegrade. They're only going to use it for a minute and a half, and it's going to take 6 million years to go away, if it will. And it's so inexpensive. And to me, if a thing is going to last 6 million years polluting the earth, you would think it would be real expensive at least.
Yeah.
Right? Like, shouldn't it cost like $500 to get a styrofoam cup?
Yeah.
You would think.
Like,
yeah.
You would think that's what's logical, but of course we're in a world that's inverse. And so, yeah, you know, it's really strange to sit in there, but it's also, you know, I did it years ago and I really fought back against a lot of what people were talking about then. And here I am, it's sort of coming full circle a decade later, taking the class again and knowing when to speak up and when to keep my mouth shut and when people are ready to hear something and when they're not. And, you know, a lot of these people are not. So letting the power of presence you know, seep into people's minds.
I imagine that you might be like the smart aleck in the back of class. The teacher's not too impressed with what you're talking about.
You know what? But then I have a near perfect grade average because my understanding of the human body. So it's been really funny to watch because I am sort of that class clown, but I'm also that like class valedictorian in there. So it's pretty funny to play that role, but also, you know, ultimately, the people who are in there do want to help people. Unfortunately, my opinion is, and again, I have a history in emergency response and such, and one of the things you always learn is this, you know, don't try to help somebody unless you're safe first. Because otherwise you may also now become another victim and you may create, you know, more problems. So now you need more rescuers there, right? And that just makes sense. If you can't swim, don't try to rescue somebody who's drowning because you may start drowning now and now there's 2 of you in the water. So similarly, you know, these people want to help people medically. You know, people in the medical system want to help people, but haven't learned how to help their own health yet. And so, of course, what they're doing is they're creating more health chaos in the world because they haven't first healed themselves. And that's an ancient admonition, you know, doctor, heal thyself, physician, heal thyself. But of course, you know, nobody's following that anymore. The world's gone crazy. And, you know, I don't know if you guys ever get to it, but I'm at this point in my life where I feel like, you know, there's a time to try to patch the hole in the Titanic, and there's a time to realize you just got to get off the boat. You know, I'm on the get off the boat path right now.
Wow.
That's well said.
Does that mean moving or changing locations or what does that mean?
It means that my hope that I don't see things getting a lot easier on planet Earth before they get a bit harder. And I think this is time to, you know, the twister gets close enough, you go down in the basement, you batten down the hatches. Right? Yeah, there's a time at which, running around and telling everybody that there's a twister coming, there's a time for that. And then there's a time to go make sure you're safe too. And I think that's kind of where we're at, looking around at what's happening in the world. At least, you know, it's not like I'm going to discontinue my outreach because that's where my passion really is, one of my huge passions. But I'm much more focused right now on where to put that energy, because I think a lot of ground's been lost, and I've just come into peace with that, I think.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, like you were talking about earlier with the disconnect and people drinking out of styrofoam cups, and yet learning about the cardiovascular system at the same time. And, you know, I see it every day. We've talked about it before, you know, going to the gym or going to the, you know, traditional doctor. You see this all the time. And that whole disconnect, you know, we're going to be talking about water on this show. And it's just really interesting how that same disconnect happens with people and their views about something so seemingly basic as water. But it's just interesting how this kind of stuff, people just don't make that connection. Why? Even in
the nutrition and health world. And I sometimes, you know, in meditating on this call coming up and doing this interview with you guys, I was just thinking about I'm surprised at how few people in the world of health and nutrition, because we have some true brilliant minds in our field who are out sharing this information, but how few people have really put any energy into focusing on water. I'm amazed that I'm one of the few voices out there. I know it is opening up and it's spreading, but it's shocking to me because of the amount of water that our bodies are made of. I mean, it's like the cliche thing to say, oh, you're 70% water. But the amount of water we're made of and the amount of water we need to consume every day, that it's not considered the fundamental building block of nutrition is bizarre. It's truly bizarre. It's bizarre that the food is we focus so much on the food. You're made of food to a degree, but you're far more made out of water, right? I mean, how much of your body is food? I mean, if we were to, burn a person down to ash and we'd have a small handful of minerals left over, but mostly what you are is water. So it is amazing. We just sort of missed this thing. I don't understand how.
Yeah, it's interesting because water is the basis of life, and it should be really the core of the food we eat. But like you were saying, water is just completely looked over. And I think it might be part of that whole mechanistic approach that people have towards health and towards our bodies, and they think we're just kind of robots and machines, and water is just a solution that they don't really ever think about. And I think it probably comes from that whole mindset, wouldn't you think?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Okay, it's clear. So it appears to be simple, right? It's like it's clear. It has no real smell. I mean, it almost shouldn't have a taste, right? There's an organoleptic experience. There's a mouthfeel and a flavor experience, but it doesn't really have much of a taste. So it's apparently very simple. And then, this is going to sound a little bit esoteric here, but human beings, since really early on, we've been obsessed with technology. And I don't mean computers. I mean, from the time we started napping flint into arrowheads, that's our first technologies, to the development of cordage from plant fiber and making cord and rope, to developing the atlatl and then later the bow, to developing containers and developing fabrics and eventually developing paper. I mean, our story is the story of us making stuff and these different industries that lead us. It's one of the challenges with being kind of a Luddite in our culture, because I get a little freaked out by where all the computer technology is going. But then I have to ask myself, well, do I think paper's not a technology? Is it better to read books than read off the internet? I mean, the books are a technology, right? They're new too. They've only been around a short time as well when you think about it.
That's right.
So, I mean, we've been at this technology thing a really long time. And it's getting weirder and weirder, but we've been at technology the whole time. The thing about water is actually destroys almost all of our technologies, right? When you build something, you try to keep water away from it.
Right.
Water will ruin almost anything that you make. And so it's almost like water is the antithesis of our focus, which is to build technological things, right? You don't want to float your MacBook in water, right?
You don't?
You don't want to drop your phone in the toilet.
Right.
You don't want rust on your car. Water is almost... So it's funny because you mentioned being mechanistic, and I guess that's what triggered this piece of the conversation, is that from the mechanistic perspective, water is an enemy. Whereas from the biological perspective, to say that life forms need water is one of the greatest understatements possible. Water is there is no life without water. Water is life. And in fact, as we'll get into later on, water may be a lot even more than that. There might be even more to it than that.
So why do you think we lose water? Because I've heard that, aren't you something like 70% or 90% they say water when you're born, and then when you die, you get brittle, and then you're about 50% or something? Is that true?
Well, it's like a corpse is 50 to 55%. It is true.
Okay.
We definitely, part of the aging process is dehydrating, but part of the aging process is also accumulating more stuff that isn't water. So that's part of why that ratio shifts a little bit too.
Okay.
Because when you're an infant, you don't have a lot of bone material. Like, you're very low in osseous material. This is a delicate thing here, but you can bounce a baby from 2 stories and they can survive that sometimes without injury. Right? You try to drop a person who's an adult from that height, it's not good because you have all this osseous material. And that, when I say osseous, I'm talking about bone material that's made out of apatite or calcium phosphate. And that stuff breaks. It's a crystal, so it snaps. But a baby hasn't really developed that yet. So this is something that's actually really valuable for listeners here. So your bones, when you see a dog bone or something, you see a bone in an anatomy class, it appears to be this really solid object, because typically when you see a bone, the bone has been baked to remove all the collagen from it, all of the cartilaginous material. Mm-hmm. But if you took a fresh bone out of a person and let's say that you soaked it in vinegar, all of the calcium phosphate, all of the hard stuff would dissolve out into the acid of the vinegar, if that makes sense. It would all dissolve away, and you'd be left with something that looked just like that bone, except you could tie it in knots. It'd be like made of rubber almost. It's all collagen. That's in your bones too. But if you took a bone out of a person and you baked it, all the collagen would go away. You'd be left with just the hard stuff. If that makes sense. Your bone's made out of both parts. Right? That's why your bone has a little flex to it. Mm-hmm. When you're a baby, you don't have that hard stuff yet. You just have the soft rubbery stuff, and that's why babies are so flexy.
Sticking their feet in their mouth.
And as you get older, you accumulate more and more of the hard stuff. And some people start accumulating that hard stuff in places they shouldn't, like in their arteries, in their pineal gland, in their solid organs. And these calcium deposits over time are part of the reason why a person has less water, because they have more hard stuff as they age.
That's interesting. So what are some things about water that, like, the average person just does not understand? I think that, a lot of people might be stumbling on this show with you and, maybe just don't understand anything about water. What are some things that just kind of pop to your mind that people don't understand about water?
Well, let's start at the beginning. I think that everybody understands that water comes from the earth, but I think one really fascinating thing is that very few people actually ever get their water from the earth. Uh-huh. And so we have this really interesting thing where water is the foundation of all the ecosystems of the planet. And obviously ecosystems are where our food comes from and where our water comes from. Yet most of us get our water, let's face it, average person gets their water either from a tap or let's say a municipal system. Mm-hmm. So essentially from a tap, or they get it from purchasing it from bottled water. And I think that basically covers most people's water consumption, at least here in the United States, in Canada, in the UK. So very few people are actually going out and gathering their water anymore. So one of the first things I think that's really interesting is people have, it's almost like, I liken it to when you have when people believe they can't pray directly to their creator, that they need first a priest or something to pray for them. Like there's an intermediary between them and their spiritual source, right? We have, and interestingly, the French word for a spring is the source, la source. And the source is where water comes from. It comes up from these springs. And we don't get it directly. We always have to either buy it from our city or we buy it from a store. And I think that's really interesting because when we drink our water, there's some people just have this idea that water works like food, right? We know we're a big long tube. The tube starts at your lips and it ends at your anus, and you eat food and it kind of goes through the tube and comes out the other side. And I think people think water might be like that, like you drink it and it goes through a long tube that comes out at your urethra and you pee it out. Uh-huh. But it doesn't work like that. What happens is when you start drinking water, it immediately starts being absorbed right into your bloodstream, from your stomach, from your small intestine and your large intestine. So the water you drink is your blood, starting within a couple of minutes. That water's already your blood.
What if water is not a good source? Like, let's say that water is the tap water. It still becomes your blood?
So that's your blood. Okay. So your blood would be made out of tap water, right? So my first point I want to make is I think it's really interesting that we're all buying our water either from the city. We might not see that directly. It might be tucked into our taxes. Mm-hmm. But we either buy our blood from our city or we buy our blood from our store. And I think that's a really weird thing because nature set it up so that all the organisms of the planet could freely drink water and build their blood, build their cerebral spinal fluid, build their tears out of, stuff that's freely given. So once we start purchasing it, we're getting into a weird kind of it's almost like a type of slavery, which is really interesting, right? We work in order to purchase the fluid that makes our blood, and it's getting more expensive. And if you go to the store to buy it, of course, it's more expensive than gasoline currently, right? By the gallon. So it's rather expensive to build your blood this way. So that's the first kind of point I want to bring up. And then you asked the question, what about the quality of it? And so let's talk about that for a minute. Let's start talking about tap water, because you guys have no doubt seen it. Are you guys in Southern California?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've been seeing this resurgence in the tap water. There's like a tap water movement now, right? And understandably, there's a movement to get away from bottled water because of all the plastics. And so we see this thing of like drink tap water, like it's an ecological choice that people are making. I think when we start looking at tap water, the really obvious first thing is chlorine is present in that water. And when you drink it, that chlorine is present now in your blood and moves throughout your body. But it also goes through your digestive tract. And we know that our digestive tract is an ecosystem, it's a forest of microbes. And those microbes are critical to our health. They're critical to our digestion. And they are ultimately really the first line of defense of our immune system. Okay. And when we know that if we take antibiotics, for instance, that we wipe out populations, whole populations of organisms that live within our gut tube. And we need to keep those viable, or else we get sick, or we develop overgrowths of pathogens. So one of the things that's interesting is you can think of chlorine as an antibiotic. That's essentially what it is. The reason that we use chlorine in tap water is because it's an antibiotic. The idea is that if you wanted to picture where you guys are right now in Southern California, and then picture where the water is coming from that you get out of your tap, and then imagine if you could see through the ground, just try to imagine the pipe infrastructure that brings that water to you. How far does that water have to travel through pipes in order to get to you? We're talking about a lot of piping, and along the way, lots of that piping is broken and rusted and cracked. Now, additionally, the same thing is true with when you poop and you pee, and that stuff gets taken away. It has to go through just as much piping. And where does that piping run? Right alongside the water piping. And that piping is broken and rusted too. Most of the United States water piping infrastructure is from the Lincoln administration.
Really?
Seriously?
I just want to repeat that. Yeah. Most of the United States water pipe infrastructure was built during the Lincoln administration. One of the issues we're facing civilly, I guess, is that we're coming up on a time where most of it needs replacing. But can you imagine a nationwide water piping infrastructure replacement program? I mean, think about the monumental task of doing that. Yeah. So what has to happen is legally tap water has to be delivered to your actual faucet with chlorine still in it, so that organisms can't get in that water and be delivered to your tap. Otherwise, you'd turn on your tap, drink that water, you could get sick, right, from organisms like, let's say, Giardia, some kind of protozoa. Mm-hmm. So that's what the chlorine's there. But also, this water's getting mingled with sewage. It just happens. It's a result of all this piping that's breaking down and running alongside, if that makes sense. So, of course, we deliver an antibiotic to the water, and then people think, well, I'll just filter that out. And so they get a filter like a Brita filter. Brita, incidentally, is owned by Clorox, which is funny because they make bleach, and then they make these filters that people use to take bleach out, right? But but examine those filters, and what you'll see is the statement on there removes the taste and smell of chlorine. But you won't see removes chlorine. It just removes the taste and smell of chlorine.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So chlorine is, of course, getting through that. And then another issue being, of course, that we shower in this stuff and we bathe in this stuff, and we end up ingesting a lot more of it through our lungs than we do through drinking it. So, once we heat that water up and we lock ourselves in a small containment unit like a shower that's full of steamed, volatilized chlorofluorocarbon, trihalomethanes, like chlorine, which turns to chloroform gas, a trihalomethane, and then we inhale that, and that ends up in our blood. So what ends up happening is our bloodstream gets contaminated with chlorine. So that's one issue that we're facing, is tap water is no bueno in this way. But the other piece is this fluoride issue. I mean, probably almost, I can't imagine there's very many listeners out there right now who are going, I really believe in this fluoridation program.
Right.
But
I doubt that.
But as a reminder, it's incredibly toxic, and it's for human beings. It's a neurotoxin, and there's a lot of really good studies out there now on this. And one of the things that's emerged is that when children drink fluorinated water, they end up with lower IQs. So let's just understand that from the beginning, that fluoride lowers IQs. It dumbs people down. It's been shown, that it destroys willpower, and it's been used for that specifically in prison camp populations during the Nazi regime and in communist Russia. It was used to pacify prison populations. Now it's in our water supply. Technically, this sodium fluoride is a drug. Technically, when I say that, I mean according to, let's say the FDA, it's a drug. So this means that our water supply is being drugged with fluoride.
Wow.
I personally feel that this is something that needs, people should have the choice about that. And I guess, ultimately they do. They've opted into a system that drugs the water, and therefore they've chosen to drink that water. Now, at the physiological level, fluoride is very similar in its electrical makeup to calcium. And so what happens is when we start to get excesses of this fluoride into our body starts to incorporate it into that osseous tissue we were talking about before, that bony matrix of calcium phosphate. So it starts bonding the fluoride to the phosphorus the way that calcium does in our bones. And so it ends up becoming part of our bone matrix. Now,